want to go back to the depression and the addiction. How bad did it get? What was the rock bottom? How much were you taking? I want to really understand the depths of the agony and what mind space you were in back then.
Well, in terms of volume of narcotics that I would consume, I would liken it to my ability to endure and suffer as an ultra runner. I have a high capacity for punishing myself, and that is something that it definitely bore itself out with the number of opioids that I consumed, really over about a 6-year period. And there were a couple of points of relapse in the ensuing years, but really a 6-year heavy period of usage. And one of the great things about the Department of Defense as the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq drew on was the amount of resources and a level of focus they threw into starting to understand the differences between post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, depression. We tend to lump those in a lot. I don't know how depressed was I? Well, I considered suicide many times, and I was extremely unhappy. Now, I don't know how to parse that out to say what part of that was neurological damage from direct exposure to roadside bombs, what part of that was, genetically predisposed, what part of that came from the synthesizing and processing of witnessing lots of horrific things. I can say I was very, very unhappy. I was a very, very unhappy man, and I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone.
You also were addicted to something which can also make you more depressed, even though you're trying to numb the pain.
Change your brain chemistry.
Yeah.
Right. You both hit it on the head. That's the one thing that gets me really fired up today when we see the struggles to hold Big Pharma accountable for, frankly, what's come out in a number of federal lawsuits, absolutely dishonest business practices. Mm-hmm. The capacity of opioids to change and alter, sometimes irrevocably, your brain chemistry cannot be understated. So, through, therapy for a number of years, I began to suss out, what behaviors or what feelings may have been attached to, to what experiences. But yeah, one of the reasons that opioids, I believe, have such a death grip in contemporary society is, and looking back at my own, recovery, was that it numbs your emotional pain. It's a quick way to not feel anything. And so while I, started taking them for severe physical pain, I now, in retrospect, look back and fully understand a lot of it is I just didn't want to feel anything anymore.
Mm-hmm. Well, how were you getting them? Obviously, besides the Big Pharma, we also have an issue with the medical professionals that are providing way too much to patients who are long past their surgeries and their healing, their physical healing.
Right. Yeah, what I'd like to say is I think, in my case, and we're all prisoners of our own experience. Mm-hmm. I had extraordinary medical practitioners. I had some of the best medical practitioners, the most ethical folks that you could ever want. You got to keep in mind where my dependency started was really the mid 2000s, and that's the high watermark for when Big Pharma was. And again, this is all borne out in federal lawsuits. They were providing absolutely bogus studies to general practitioners. I don't believe that anyone intended or through malfeasance were prescribing me doses of medication in some nefarious way or due to a lack of intellect. I think we were all doing what it was taking at the height of the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts to keep people like me in the game. And as a professional and a very serious business unit, I was on a team of four. We couldn't afford to not have me deploy. And so I own as much responsibility as the folks that were working with me, is that we were going to do whatever it took to stay in the game. What I never knew was, as a really straight edge guy, I'd never had a narcotic before I'd had a painkiller at 37. I didn't know how quickly I could become dependent.
And in the 50s, the doctors were sort of told to withhold pain meds from people because they were afraid of getting folks addicted. And then sometime, I think it was the 70s, it became considered cruel to do that. And that doctors started trusting their patients with what they said about their pain threshold. And so it was really the norm in the medical industry to listen to the patient. If the patient said they had pain, then give them painkillers. And it was a lot in part because the companies were lying about how addictive these substances are.
So the doctors, your doctors, who were quite upstanding, read these studies and it was like, oh, this isn't addictive. It's okay. He needs this to get through the next deployment, the next whatever it might be, the next battle. And that's...
But how did you get... So if you're addicted and you're out in the field, is it easy to get those drugs because you just say you're in pain and they say, okay? Is that how you did it?
Well, I think generally what would happen is, working in a non-traditional field where, it wasn't a 9-to-5 job where, I could swing by the CVS at the end of the day. You would get amounts of medications based on how long, you'd be deployed for. It really varied, over 6 years, how how many and how frequently I got them changed based on, the tolerance that I'd built up. And, it's difficult to, it was always, and this is the lie we tell ourselves if you become addicted to these drugs, via legal means, is, well, I can't be wrong because I'm getting it from a doctor. I'm getting it from several doctors. They're telling me that I need them, and it's not until afterwards, if you're fortunate and if you're as lucky as me to come out on the other side and not go down. It's a bifurcated path, and if you could continue to take that down, to a point where we're at right now. In my opinion, the reason that the Mexican drug cartels are so prolific is we set conditions in the United States for this to happen. If you get large portions of your population addicted and dependent on these drugs, and then without really understanding withdrawal, without really understanding addiction, DEA, the FDA, and these folks come in and they start shutting these doctors down, addicts aren't just going to stop. They're going to go find other methods for getting those drugs. And as a society, to not own our responsibility for the situation we have with the proliferation of Mexican cartels operating in the U.S., and that if you shut down addicts' resources through physicians, by and large, most of them are going to go seek that drug somewhere else. And so fentanyl and other opioid derivatives that have come in large part because of the conditions we've created ourselves here in the U.S.
So it's harder to get it by legal means, so now we're going to the streets.
Sure,
where it's cheaper. And
because if you've not been an addict or you're not going through recovery, it's not that you're empathetic or you don't understand, but it's being addicted to opioids, or really anything from my layman's perspective, isn't a moral choice. You didn't wake up and say, well, my doctor's not going to give me Percocet anymore. I guess I'll just stop using it. That's a really reductive understanding of addiction. And, again, this binary choice that we discuss now politically, as if it's a push-pull, that below the southern border, all this stuff is being pushed up into the United States. It's being pushed up because there was a demand signal created, frankly, by people like me and tens of millions of other Americans. And again, I think we need to own that.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.